Berserk fans, I have a favor to ask you because it has come to my attention that there is a proto chapter for Berserk lodged into this deluxe edition. I read from where we left up into that prototype chapter, and I would like to know what your thoughts are on it. Is it something that's purely a novelty and can be skipped, or should I do a special video next week where instead of continuing through the story, I review that proto chapter as well as going back and re-reviewing the Black Swordsman with the context I have with the story up until now? That's my question, and please let me know in the comments down below. I really will be looking at what the general consensus is, the highest voted replies, to decide what to do. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and continue on with Berserk. And I had quite a few people asking if I had LASIK, why was I wearing glasses in the last video. Those were blue light glasses to try and help with a headache I was dealing with staring at screens all day, and I just didn't take it off when recording because I forgot they were on my face. But this story picks up pretty much right where we left off, and we see a cart going down the road with a little monster looking creature crawling along the side of the road, and they're like, don't mess with it. And this being the Berserk world, I'm like, that's the smartest guy I've seen in all of Berserk. And it is with great pleasure that I present the award for smartest man in the world to the guy who just said, better not, in Berserk. You, sir, will definitely live for at least a little bit longer. Flat out, full stop, period. Best advice for anyone living in Berserk. Don't touch things, hands within the cart at all times. But we cut from there back to the blacksmithery where we are seeing Erica lead Rickert around. She shows him a massive supply of weapons where we basically just get a rundown of everything we can assume Guts will eventually have and utilize. Like, there's a pretty obvious reason a master blacksmith character is kind of introduced here and Guts is staying alongside them so that eventually, yes, he can utilize the man's weapons.
Mild shock.
Pretty blunt and straightforward. That's kind of one element of Berserk storytelling I've criticized repeatedly. It is, I think, a phenomenal story when it comes to themes and character development, but every now and then, Mura just puts things in like, this is gonna pay off in 5 pages, and you're like, got it. We even see the oh-so-iconic, probably a bunch of people will be able to recognize this who haven't even watched or read Berserk, and that is the massive sword, which I have been looking for in Elden Ring since I started playing, and I've yet to find it. Don't tell me where it is, I want to find it on my own. But the blacksmith comes in and sees them snooping through his things, and he begins to say, a king sent out a proclamation long ago to bring him a sword that could kill a dragon, and so the Lord put me on the job. At the time, I'd gotten sick of doing work for nobles, make 'em refined, make 'em elegant. Swords are just large butcher knives after all, tools meant for killing people. And so I forged it, as it would describe, a sword that could butcher a dragon. Gee, I wonder who's gonna have that sword!
Coquettish.
But if anyone could handle this, it'd still just be a hindrance. I don't like losing track of the essence of the tool, but that's exactly what I did here. Now it's a good reminder. But no, this ain't even what you'd call a sword. It's a meaningless slab of iron you can't even lift. For killing dragons and monsters that ain't even real. Your friend looks like he's about to fight a dragon, though. Seems to want to fight even after losing his hand and eye. He ain't up to the job, is he? Dragons are dragons because humans can't beat them. Immediately knowing Guts was gonna get this sword, I just imagined him saying,
that's all I needed for him to do that, and it became personal with me.
But we cut to Guts actually then at a waterfall, and he is slicing fish with a sword as they try and do like their little upstream migration, showing despite losing an eye and an arm, Guts is still the most dangerous man around, because he's just sitting there butchering fish. Is he even eating them? Don't be wasteful. But we then cut to Rickert and Guts talking, and it seems that Guts is planning to leave in the morn of the next day, and he's going to visit Casca. He brings her some food and saying like, hey, Erica did a really great job. I think you'd like this. And there is a demonstration of what I do not like happening to Casca here, but it's also complemented by some extremely emotionally poignant scenes. So we see Casca's state has gotten so bad she's licking the bowl of food that's put before her, which that's too far. That wouldn't. But this, understandably, because of his own mental stunting, really angers Guts. He doesn't understand what she's doing, and he snaps at her. And some of her clothing ends up getting torn, because Berserk has to have boobs one way or another every freaking chapter. But with her clothing being torn and Guts being the gargantuan idiot that he is, he gets aroused and he tries to kiss this person who is clearly so traumatized they can't even eat right, which, yeah, a lot of my worst fears around how Casca's character would be handled are on display here, and I'm just really hoping we get some kind of return to form, reestablishment of her agency, but for now, it's really the worst handling there could be, in my opinion, but she does obviously have a pretty bad reaction to Guts trying to make a sexual advance on her, and she runs away. And we see this kind of devastates Guts as well, because the woman he loves, the woman he was considering leaving this life of violence behind with, is basically terrified to even be alone with him. I mean, they're forced to keep her prisoner so that she doesn't wander out in the world to get found and killed by the demons that have obviously already done so much damage to her. It's a waterfall of sprinkle and sunshine here. Despite my criticisms of how exactly Casca is being handled here, I do want to praise again the character work that's happening, because yes, what Guts just did was stupid, but it also is kind of understandable with his lack of understanding of what's going on. He can't get what's going on with Casca, and so that's why he's calling her idiot and being kind of angry but also heartbroken, and Casca is obviously in a very understandable state of just completely rejecting and not processing the world around her, because, you know, she just witnessed everyone she knows and cared about get slaughtered. Her purpose in life turned out to be a lie, and there was the obvious final nail in the coffin for trauma there. So it is something that in the moment isn't my favorite handling, but that doesn't take away from the extremely powerful dynamic developed between these characters taking such a sour twist. And now every interaction they have is just so filled with heartbreak, because you know the potential that was once there for a better life is now entirely squandered. And despite it not being his greatest crime, for us the readers, it almost feels like Griffith's greatest crime. Guts then begins his gearing up, and we have a little bit of a montage of him strapping stuff on and even putting knives within his gear, which he has a weird conversation with Rickard about, where Rickard asks, "You can use knives, Guts?" And he responds, "I had judo teach me the ropes a long time ago. It's not my style, so that's as far as we went." Which, we've seen Guts use knives before, but I'll accept that he's never been like formally trained in them, but knowing what Guts is about to use and already his legacy of oversized swords being what he's used from essentially the beginning here, I just had Guts with this in my head.
What is this?
A center for ants!
But he is officially returned to the Black Swordsman, it looks like. He even has a false hand put on, which was conveniently in the blacksmith stuff, and there is the cannon within it as well that Rickard seems to have loaded up and gotten ready for him. Now, to my surprise, the blacksmith doesn't hand Guts the massive sword, because he's clearly not, maybe even if Guts has told him the stories, I'm not sure if he has or not, of what happened to him, he's not giving him the monster slayer, and instead gives him a really well-built normal sword. Normal. It's still bigger than like most people. And we see Guts shatters another blade with it, showing that yes, this blade that he's being given now is really well made, and it's actually a solid sword. And I assumed Guts was going to go out adventuring at this point and then eventually come back, which made sense to me because we have to check in with Casca and the other characters. Maybe they'd be dead. Not sure. Something horrible because Berserk to have Guts be sad. But just then, he has his brand!
My brand!
It starts bleeding, and we see that creature that was on the side of the road sniffing something out has finally found him. And Casca also has a burn begin on her chest deep down within the cave. And the creature says, "I followed the scent of evil. My nose is really good." Which, you know, good on you, you little sniffy guy. That's a good talent to have. But little sniffy guy turns into a massive demon and starts chanting sacrifice. Guts then yells for everyone to stay back, and he says, "My lucky day, the first one." And then we get this face from Guts, which I think we all know what that means.
Gonna have a bad time.
Now, he takes that sword and slashes it through the demon and does a significant amount of damage. And I was wrong. I assumed this was going to be establishing the sword would be good enough for him for now. But no. After fighting the creature for a little bit longer and seeing commentary from the blacksmith saying, "I thought he was going to be fighting people. I didn't know he'd be fighting monsters," Guts throws a couple more swings in there and the sword breaks. Guts now unarmed pun not intended, is thrown around, and he actually even starts saying, like, I can't die to this thing after everything I've been through. He is then told by Rickert to use the cannon, which he goes, and the blast is so intense, it dislocates his arm. Okay. Maybe work that shoulder muscle a little bit there, bud, but every time you dislocate that shoulder, it'll be more likely to dislocate next time. At least that's something the internet told me. I don't know if that's true. But we see Guts spot the Monster Slayer sword. He picks it up and utilizes it. And now not only has the beast that's attacking him been shot through a head by a freaking cannonball, but Guts then takes the Monster Slayer and bisects the demon. Guts then says, you held out on me. You got something much better suited to my fight. And the blacksmith is like, you can wield... That's like... Ha ha! We then get a throwback to the line a few pages ago of dragons are dragons because humans can't beat them. But then we add on, so what's a man who beats dragons? Ooh! We then get Rickert trying to get Guts to stay, saying essentially the Band of the Hawk is done and we should all just stay together and try and protect ourselves here, which I don't entirely disagree with, Rickert. I think you got a point there, bud. But Guts goes, nay, sir. The Band of the Hawk is not done. Casca is our leader. You must protect her. I'm the head of the raiders, and I'm going to go out and raid the enemy. We then get some insight from Guts into his actual mental state, and he talks about how it's essentially just rage that's keeping him moving forward. And that is the end of He Who Hunts Dragons. And we're going to continue on in a minute, but I want to just talk about how I think Mura's storytelling is very poignant and good after he gets the ball rolling, but as a storyteller, whenever he kind of comes to another point where he has to kind of reset, restructure, and go forward, it doesn't become bad, but it becomes the least smooth for me as a reader, because it feels like to me as a writer, he really wants to get the ball rolling, so he gets as many setup and payoff elements just gone, done as quickly as he can, and I almost wish Berserk was a little bit slower. I could have taken this instead of being one section, like 3, to really establish the state of everyone there, show repeated attempts to try and like get closer to Casca, maybe show some slight progress so I have hope as a reader that there could be something in the future, and even if there's a death in the future, it'd be more tragic. It just really feels like you wanted to get Guts on the road, show up, really have this like video game setup, payoff, weapon, monster, go, done, bam, on the road. That is a little bit unsatisfying, but it's by no means bad. It's just a slight critique of how things got started now that we are in the post-Golden Age step. We are now in the Conviction arc, and we're going to actually keep going here. We see some pilgrims on the side of the road, and they are witnessing some type of holy army go by. We have some character establishment between some of the officers here. I'm not going to get too deep into them because I don't know how relevant they'll be, and if they are, I'll introduce them when they turn out to be. But for now, we're just going to get to what they find, which is a river of blood, or sorry, a red lake, and I assume this is just the leftovers of the Band of the Hawk after their remains were just tossed out from the dimension they were butchered in, and it was enough blood to turn this lake red. And we hear of the prophecy that essentially matches with what Griffith has turned into, the 5th angel even being said to be the Hawk of Darkness, which like, Band of the Hawk, Hawk of... You guys made the connection. You made it right there. And of course, it shall plunge the world into an age of darkness. And to my genuine, total surprise, we then get a small little square saying 2 years later. All right. 2 years. This is now post-Black Swordsman 2. That becomes quickly apparent because Puck is with Guts. And this is what made me want to actually go back and reread the Black Swordsman after I get through this section. But we get some pretty typical standard Berserk quick bad guy setup and payoff for some action. There are some horrific bandits that have kidnapped a woman along the side of the road making camp, and they are talking about this tree they're camped by and how it used to be a part of some form of religious ceremony for heretics where they would force people to take out some of their insides, keeping it YouTube appropriate, nail them to a tree, and do one walk around the tree. Lovely. One of the members of these ruffians, though, takes the kidnapped woman and is like, we can get another one. I want to see if she can do one ring around the tree. But there is a small little, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, look at this panel. It's up. It's up. That's what that is. And we see that Guts, cloaked in darkness, has actually been like sitting on the opposite side of this very large tree. And he, of course, stands up and is like, all right, gotta handle these horrible people, but let's get some information first. And he asks if that story was true after taking a knife that someone threatens him with and just slicing their tongue with it, because Guts. And the guy confirms, yes, that's true. And Guts then begins a little bit of a fight with them, and he immediately, like, these guys are no trouble for him whatsoever. They're not even meant to be posed as a threat. Because, of course, kind of cleverly, and I actually do like this, the real threat, the real villain in this situation is the tree that turns out from all these sacrificial heretic ceremonies is a monster slash demon, which I actually appreciate that. I like that little misdirect of he's gonna have to fight the, no he's not, he's gonna have to fight that. I think my favorite thing from this moment though is when he takes his fake hand and just punches the guy in the face with iron. I don't know, I didn't think about that. I had to think about how one of his fists now was just literally hitting people with a slab of iron. But as this demon tree emerges, of course, everyone runs away, and then Guts has to fight one of, again, my favorite creature designs I've seen in Berserk. This isn't my favorite chapter, but I love the creature design of this demon tree. It's covered in these twisted faces of obviously that are meant to be like the captured souls of the people who are made to walk around it. And Guts taking his gargantuan sword is just slicing and dicing his way through it, but there's like blood coming from the tree in some of the panels, which I can't tell is blood from people that were just eaten because someone was just eaten by the tree, or if it's blood from the tree. But then I realized it doesn't matter. It's still the visual of a bloody tree fighting Guts, which is just horrific. The woman who was kidnapped is tied up, so she can't necessarily run away, but the bandits who are left alive and capable of running do flee as Guts handles this thing. And I just appreciate the hell out of some of these panels showing the action. Action in Berserk is never not entertaining. You can tell Mura loves drawing and depicting violence in like a, not Tarantino, but it's similar to Tarantino in the celebration of violence type tone without necessarily glorifying it because of the backdrop that's almost always behind the violence depicted in Berserk. It's a celebration while carefully not glorifying, in my opinion, because if you look at the meta of what's going on in the story, Guts' embracing of violence is tragic and horrible for him as a character. And so for me personally, it's always like a, yeah, don't, but yeah. We then get the spirits of the tree, or some part of the demonic tree as the sun comes out, vanishes, and we get the remark from Guts, "First I've seen the sun in 3 days." And Puck then comes out and starts talking to the girl, and she has a very negative reaction to it being an elf. It's confirmed that Guts wouldn't have necessarily gotten involved in this fight if it wasn't for Puck's little interferences that got the attention of the bandits. But the girl remarks, "You're an elf from Misty Valley," which Puck is like, no. We cut to the bandits running through the forest though, and we see they have officially gone into what appears to be the Misty Valley and are descended upon by dozens, if not hundreds, of little tiny elves. And we see the giant elf that we've actually seen depicted before, who was there when part of the Band of the Hawk was slaughtered. And after one of the bandits remarks, "First monsters and now elves? Dear God, this ain't some kid's fairy tale. It is a fairy tale." The elf remarks, "Yes, this is a fairy tale for children." Which, like, it being Berserk, yeah, I'd read this to kids. YouTube, no, that was a joke. Don't demonetize me and or mark this for children. It is not for children, but it's not explicitly for anyone over 18. For anyone who doesn't know, that's how YouTubers have to age gate their videos now. They have to say, no, it's not for children, but it's not explicitly for people over 18. And if you fall in that gap, you get full monetization. If you go outside that, much worse. Or you have to obey like other weird laws. It's so confusing. I just want to make content. But continuing on, we are now in the chapter Lost Children. And we see Jill has taken Guts to her village. And instead of getting a warm reception of actually like, you know, returning this child to their village, we get a violent one because an abusive father figure comes out and just starts throwing hands on Jill for her kind of questioning his service in the military, calling him like a pissed drunkard and stuff, which he definitely is. And even her mother, when she comes back, is like, "Where have you been?" It's not very pleasant. And the whole tone of the village seems very shut down. There's not exactly a lot of people out in the streets, and instead we just get people watching from windows. But after something is flicked at the abusive father who's hitting Jill, we get him looking at Guts being like, "What's the deal?" And Guts like, "It wasn't me," and he holds up Puck and he's like, "Is this?" To which the whole village is like, "Oh my god, an elf, we need to murder it. Give over the elf, we're killing it." And Guts at first is like, I mean, as long as you don't kill him, I'll give him over. But after they make it clear that they're gonna kill Puck, he's like, fine. And as they're literally shouting like death to the elf, Guts just takes out his gargantuan sword and smashes a cart, making a lot of people go like, oh god. And he actually, like, someone tries to sneak up behind him, so Guts like does like a toss and like, you know, puts him down on the ground, but it was like a little old lady, and he's like, oh, that's not a good look. But Guts, of course, easily gets away from these people and jumps over the town's wall and then like hides back against the wall, and the villagers are like, oh, he got away already, darn. But Jill is the only one smart enough to like come to the section of the wall he hid behind and look down. We get an adorable little rant from Puck, who I'm quickly falling in love with. Puck's great. But Jill tells Guts to go to that abandoned mill over there. I'll see you later. I'll bring you food. So sorry about that. And Guts warns her, do not come see me before dawn. Only come see me after dawn, which we then cut to that night, and we see Jill is having to hide from her abusive father at night for horrific reasons. Not going to get into that. Berserk is berserk, but as the sun comes up, we see Jill goes to the mill and finds Guts asleep. Puck warns her, do not wake him up, he just fell asleep, because of course Guts was up all night fighting the demons that come for him at night. So I guess he sleeps from like 6 a.m. to noon, 1, 2-ish, travels in the afternoon, evening, and in the night, for the last 2 years, Guts has been fighting. Unless he gets a night off every now and then. But we see he wakes up and like some weaker demons are even coming to him from the shadows and Guts is killing them. He notices Jill like waiting next to him, actually fell asleep in his lap. Jill feels very comfortable with Guts, and you know, I don't get it, he terrifies me. But we then get filled in from Jill why the village has such a severe hatred of elves. It appears that swarms of elves from a place called the Misty Valley have been coming and taking children from the village. Puck takes a break from eating a lot of the food Jill brings to say like, there's no way, that's not, it's gotta be some kind of mistake. And Jill says they're tiny, they glow faintly, they got little wings, elves. And they like eat people. And this is where I started to be like, is this nightmare fuel? No, there's no way tiny little bugs can be nightmare fuel. I was wrong, because just then, Guts' brand starts to hurt. I assume because he gets a look in his eye. He goes,
My brand.
and he runs outside. And we see an immense swarm of little glowy bugs that sure do look like elves, Puck, going into the village. And Guts gets this face. Yeah, I wouldn't sleep in this dude's lap. And this swarm descends on the village, and we see they just drive their bodies through some animals and people and just like obliterate them. They just go through and are tearing holes in a way that reminds me of like how people died in the final Matrix when like all those just blades were going at them in the fight in the real city, you know what I'm talking about? Just utterly eviscerated, and it's horrifying. And I actually thought to myself, like, how is Guts gonna fight that? I mean, they're stealing children, he's going to fight that. And he does it in the most Guts way possible ever. Even during this swarm attack, though, the father is being an abusive, terrible person, so I'm really looking forward to him dying, please. But there is a child in the village who's been left outside that no one's going to help because the abusive father's a dick, and it's just running from these little attackers trying to be safe. Just as it looks like it's about to be taken, we see Guts take the flat of his massive blade and just start sweeping them away in the most mosquito fight I think we will ever get in Berserk, and this made me laugh genuinely out loud. I think it's really cool and funny to see him just take a massive fly swatter and be like, batter up! And then Guts gets a clear look at these things, and they certainly are elf adjacent, but I don't know really if they are for sure elves or not at this point. Saving the child, Guts does the most Guts thing he could do, because instead of like putting the child inside, trying to get the child to safety right away, he understands the elves want the kid, so he takes the child, puts him on the end of his blade by his shirt, in the most sturdy shirt ever made. Whoever made this shirt, good job. It can resist hanging a child from a blade. And he runs through the village with the child on his sword. Like, hey, take the bait, come fight me. And there's this little kid way up in the air like, oh my God! That is the funniest shit ever. Wow, that is solidly great. It works because Guts then lures all of the little things out of the village into a nearby shack, and when they follow him inside, he opens up his arm cannon and just unleashes hell. A massive fireball burns away, essentially it appears, almost all of the cloud of them, and the final shot we get is Guts realizing that this fight is not over, because the queen, I assume, maybe, of this horde is looking down on them with some more of the little buggy boys. And this is where we will end, because after here we jump on into the prototype, which I'd like to know whether or not that's worth me getting into and doing a deep dive, or if you'd just like to see me do Black Swordsman, or hey, neither of those, continue on with the story. But when it comes to my thoughts on what we just read, I stand by structurally it's a bit clumsy, and that seems to be one of Mura's big problems when it comes to these initiating steps into kicking off new arcs, new beats of a story. But overall, it's still a lot of fun, and the character of Guts, being in a similar mental place we saw in Black Swordsman, has so much more depth with the context that even these like absurd, over-the-top, I want to kill moments and these rictus grin facial expressions that before just came across as like, oh, look how badass he is, now have this tinge of look how damaged he is. I've talked about ad nauseum how Berserk is a meditation on trauma, recovery from trauma, how new incidents can send you spiraling back down in the depths you saw before, but there's this now glimmer of hope where I know what Guts needs most is people and friends around him that show there's goodness and kindness in the world, and despite there being continual beats of monsters like this abusive father, having someone like Guts, Jill, it shows me a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of Guts caring about others, that while he may, yes, be the type of person who's going to save the day by using a defenseless child as bait, he's still going to save the day, and he's not completely given in to nihilism and just a complete lack of faith in humanity. That's the front he puts forward, but underlying it all is a fight that, well, it is spurred on by rage and anger, is on the right side of things, and is a violent path towards him maybe eventually growing out of the pain he feels. I hope he ends up, obviously, taking his revenge on Griffith and ending this age of darkness, but for now, we must just wait and see. I'm going to give this section of Berserk a light 7 out of 10. Definitely got things going and was fun, and it had some emotionally poignant moments, but obviously it's not up there with the best Berserk had to offer up to now. Let me know what you think of these chapters in the comments down below and how I should proceed. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and thank you again to the people who are willing to give me $1 to go see the uncensored version on Patreon. I finally got one of my biggest Berserk videos that was completely demonetized, remonetized, but obviously I lost all of the money that was being made during that time because they weren't putting ads on it, so it's a big bummer, and now I'm basically making pennies on a video I spent a lot of effort on. So seriously, everyone who's supporting this series over on Patreon, I will get you the uncensored versions as quickly as possible, and you are the best. Have a good one, y'all. Bye!